Uh, Good morning from beautiful Melbourne, Australia, or good afternoon, good evening, as is appropriate to you. Thank you for joining us in our second webinar. And today we are going back to something that's very basic and very fundamental to the use of our software, and that's working with text files, importing text files to populate your jobs with data and perhaps do other things with the text file as well, such as working with images, importing orders, etc. As always, if you have questions, you can pop them into your chat window and we'll get to the questions at the end of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and we will have it on our YouTube channel within about a week. Webinar number 1 on TS Portal is already up there if you want to have a look at that one. So we've got quite a bit to get through. It will probably be here for about an hour. So grab a tea, coffee, whiskey, whatever is your poison, settle in and let's get started. Okay, as I said, we're going to look at very basic stuff today, working with text files, including text file basics, because not all text files are the same. What are the formats we support and what's the data of inside those text files that we need and how do you identify it? Of course, we'll be importing text files a few times and we need to look through all the different options that are available to you that need to be set when you import a text file to make sure the right data gets to the right fields and does what you want it to do. We'll use a text file in a bit more of an advanced manner to work with images. We'll match our data to images. We'll even import images, set poses, set a main image, all with a text file. Then we're going to import orders. We will use a text file in a very common way, and that is to import the order information into our job and automatically have our queues populate with the correct packages. What format does our text file need to be in order to import orders? And finally, we will do the reverse. We'll export a text file from the software. That won't take long. We'll finish off with that simple method of exporting text file, get our data back out, including data that you haven't imported in the first place. So, text file basics. Well, first thing you need to know is what's a text file and which are the ones we support. Excel documents and Word documents are not text files. We can't import those. If you are given an Excel file from a school, or from a photographer, from a customer, whoever, you need to export that Excel document as a text document or a CSV. The two formats we support are text, so the extension for that will be .txt, or CSV files, comma separated value files, and the extension for those will be CSV. A CSV is still a text file. It's just a little bit hookier, and it means, as you'll see, you can work with it in a spreadsheet. So plain text files, which have an extension .txt and are opened up in any text editor, Notepad, WordPad, Notepad++, etc. The data inside them can be, broadly speaking, in 3 different formats. Can be delimited in 3 different ways. What do I mean by delimiting? I mean, how does the text file indicate where one field ends and another field begins? You've got 3 examples in those columns on that slide. It's the same data in all 3, but we've delimited the data in 3 different ways. Our fields are first name, last name, ID, and a homeroom. And in the first lot of data on our left, we are using a comma to separate the fields, to delimit the fields. There's a comma between the first and last name. There's a comma between the last name and the ID, and so on. No spaces. There's no space between the end of the first name and the beginning of the last name, for example. So that's what we call a comma delimited plain text file. In the middle, we have a tab delimited text file. Here we've not used a comma. There's a tab that separates the data. That's still very popular, possibly not as popular as using a comma, but you will see quite often tab delimited text files. Now, why would you have tab instead of comma? Well, perhaps your data somewhere in a field is going to have a comma, so you can't use comma because it would consider that to be a change of field. So that's where you tend to see maybe tab files is if potentially your data has got commas inside one of the fields, as opposed to using it to separate the fields. So comma and tab delimited are the two most common text file formats. The column on the right looks very nice and neat, looks very appealing because things are in a nice columnar sort of format. That's what we call fixed length. Here, there's no delimiter, there's no comma, there's no tab, there's nothing to tell us where one field finishes and the other one begins, except we know that the fields are in fixed length. The fields are, in this example, 15 characters long or 15 characters wide, whichever way you want to talk about it. So that's how we know where the data finishes and ends. We know that the first field is 15 characters long, and then starting from the 16th character is the next field, and from the 31st character is the third field, and so forth. Looks neat, but it has the obvious disadvantage in that perhaps you may have data that is more than 15 characters. If we end up with a name with 16 characters or more, those extra characters would get truncated. So fixed length files, text files, are not very common for that reason, but you need to be able to identify it if you ever get one. And ironically, I received one from a customer just the other week, and I thought no one was using them. A very common type of text file is the CSV. It's still a text file, and by definition, the data is separated by a comma. But the advantage of it is that they open pretty much directly in your spreadsheet programs, and therefore they're easy to read and easy to work with. And I'll just show you one, for example. So that's a comma separated text file. It's a CSV, and it's opened in a spreadsheet program. I don't use Excel, I use a different one, but fundamentally it's the same thing. And because you can work with it in a spreadsheet program, you have all the power of a spreadsheet. You can do advanced search and replaces, you can change case, you can make it look pretty, you can do formulas and calculations and whatnot. It's far easier to work in a text file in a spreadsheet program than it is to work in something like Notepad, which is what the plain text files open up in. So that's the advantage of CSV. It's probably the most common format I see, and certainly what I use because I can work with it in these programs, in these spreadsheet programs. So keep that text file in mind, that CSV file in mind, because we will import that one to begin with. Now, the thing is, before we import a text file, before we import any text file, keep your wits about you. There's a few things you need to know, and these obviously will become automatic as you get familiar with the whole procedure. As I said, you need to know what data format your text file is in. Is it comma separated? Is it tab separated? Is it fixed length? Or is it separated by something other than a comma? It doesn't need to be a comma, it could be any other character. Comma is the most common one. Give it a quick look over. Look for any obviously wrong things in that text file. Is there a whole bunch of data that looks wrong to you, that perhaps has been duplicated or is missing? Anything you can do in the text file in Excel is better. Try to get the data as perfect as possible before you import it, because it's far easier to work with your data in a spreadsheet sort of program than it is in Neopack in details mode directly. You have far more tools available to you in your spreadsheet programs. So give it a quick look over. If there's anything you can fix it there rather than fix it in Neopack and then import it. Have the file open as you import it. There's no share violation. Neopack will happily import the file even though it may be open in Excel or somewhere else. Windows won't complain and give you a share violation. Importantly, have an idea of what's your unique field. Most times in school photography, for example, you are going to have a unique field, the student ID, identify which one it is, because you'll need to tell the software that. Identify which field you'll use to make folders if that's what you want to do. If we look at this text file again, I'll bring it up. You can see the field number 3, C, the student ID. That's obviously going to be our unique field. That's how the software will know which subject is which. If it sees 2 records of the same ID, it knows it's the same person and won't import that data twice. And we've got an example there. Row 20 and 21 has the same ID, also has the same first and last name, but software will know that that's the same record, won't import it twice. You won't get 2 duplicate subjects, which then break things down the line. You'll end up printing stuff twice, etc., etc. So identify your unique field. In here, it's our 3rd field. Identify what field you're going to be using to create folders. Creating folders is a great thing we do in the software. It makes it really easy for you then to create proof sheets, do your exports for yearbooks, etc., print composites, group photos, etc., etc. And normally in school photography, your folder field will be teacher or a homeroom or the grade, something along those lines. We'll be using the homeroom, although we could probably just as easily use teacher in this text file. So make sure you know that before you start, before you import the text file. And it goes without saying, what are you going to be doing with this text file? Are you just importing data the first time, or are you importing it the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or 5th time for updating purposes? Are you going to be matching to images? Are you importing orders? The reason you need to know that is because your options that you'll be setting when you import will vary depending on what you're wanting to achieve with that text file. So if you're in doubt, if you're brand new and you're in doubt, consult with your more senior TimeStone person. So enough of the preamble. Let's fire up Neopack and import our first text file. I'm going to open job. My first job is called job 1, so I don't get confused. It's empty. There's nothing in it. Now, we're in details mode, and we have our fields, last name, first name, email, which we don't need, and we've got homeroom, teacher, and grade as well, which matches what we have in our text file. If our text file had more fields than we needed, than we had in the job, if we had a field called birth date, for example, where we put the kid's date of birth, which may be needed for an ID card, and we don't have that field, we would need to come into Neopack. There's 2 ways of doing it. We could come into Neopack and go Edit Fields and just add the birth date field, for example. And that would add it to this job only. We could say that it's the birth date, give it the special field. I can't find right now. There it is. So we've added a birth date field to our job. We don't need it for this job, just showing you how you do it. The other way of doing it is more globally in the TimeStone Administrator. We come into TS Admin, we go to Fields, and you can add a field in there. Now, please, 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 if you're new to this and you're not familiar with TS Admin, consult the senior TimeStone person in your organization who works with TimeStone Administrator, who sets all this stuff up for you. Because anything you do here doesn't just affect the job you're working on, but will affect all the jobs potentially and everybody else in your organization. And you don't want that. So if you are brand new and aren't the person who normally works in TS Admin, in the TimeStone Administrator, certainly check with the relevant person before you come working in here. So back to Neopack, we have the fields ready. We are ready to import the data into it for the very first time. We do that in details mode, subjects, import text file, browse to where your text files are kept, and I've already done so. That's my area. That's the file I want. Now, don't just be gung-ho, double click it and open it. We need to set a whole lot of parameters before we import the text file. So just highlight it like that, but don't actually open it yet. And then hit the setup button in the bottom left-hand corner of this window. And that presents you with this very important window where you will do most of your work with importing text files. Let's work through it. Let's look through the relevant options for this first text file. To begin with, you will always need to tell it what type of text file you're working with. Okay. Is it a fixed file, as we've discussed? No, it's normally not. Is it delimited? Yes, it will be. Is it by tab? No, it's not. In our case, it's delimited by comma. A CSV is a comma delimited text file. If it was a different character, we just enter the character in there, but it's normally a comma and you can just leave it there. Do we want to ignore the first line? What do we mean by that? Let's have a look at that data again. My first line is a title line. Okay, I don't want to import that. It will just make a subject called last name with an ID of student ID, etc., etc. So you ignore that first line if you do have a title line in there. Now, the field map in the middle is the most important part of this window. This is where people, if you're going to make a mistake, this is where it will be, by incorrectly mapping the fields, which is our technical terminology. Let's work through them. The grey ones are what we call system fields. They're not necessarily fields you have in your data, and we don't need them all. We're not going to worry about labels because we don't have labels in our data. A label is just a tag. And we are certainly not making families in this example. But we do want to make folders. So it's asking us which field in our text file is the field by which we want to group our subjects into folders. If I just bring that text file up again, it's field number 1, 2, 3, 4. D, fourth field, we are going to use the homeroom to group our subjects into folders by. Okay, so we just pop a 4 in there. That's all you need to do. The first name was field number 1, last name was field number 2, and our ID, we had called it student ID in the text file, but the ID was field number 3. We didn't have email, so we just leave that blank. No data will end up in there. The homeroom was field 4, as we mentioned. Now, teacher and grade, which one was which? Teacher was 5 and grade was 6, so that's all lined up nicely for us. Teacher was 5 and grade was 6. And the birth date, the field that we just made, we don't have data for that, so we leave it blank. So that's what we call the field map, and that is where you need to be careful. Once you've mapped those fields, check it one more time before you do anything else. Go back to this text file, have it open next to Neopack. I can't really do that because of the screen sharing system I've got going. Otherwise, I'd have it open next to Neopack and we can look at one and look at the other at the same time. So check that one more time. The first name is 1, last name 2, ID 3, 4, 5, 6 for homeroom, teacher, and grade. I believe I've got that right. If I haven't, yell in the chat window. Then on the right-hand side, top right-hand corner is the important one. If we do have a unique field, and we do for this job, because it's the ID, sometimes you may shoot certain jobs where there is no ID, there is no unique field, you don't care. You may be shooting a wedding, for example. You don't really have subjects. But we do for most of our jobs. So we need to tell it which is our unique field in our data. And the unique field is the ID. It nearly always will be the ID. The stuff underneath it, their options will come to towards the end. They are options that are relevant if you're importing more data, if you're importing text files for the second, third, or fourth time to add more subjects or to append the data that's already in there. So because we're importing this the first time, it really doesn't matter what we choose in there, and we'll leave it blank. Or we'll just leave it on the default. The stuff down the bottom is to do with matching with images. We're not doing it with this first text file, so we can leave it with blank. So we are ready to go. We are ready to import that text file, except my advice to you is, one more time, to check that field map. Because I am certain, and Mark and Carrie will probably back me up, the most common error is an incorrect mapping of the fields, and it's a real nuisance to have to do it again, delete the old data, overwrite it. So get it right the first time, check the field map as your last thing you do before you leave this window. So I've checked that 3 times before I hit OK. and then have the file selected that you want to import, which is number 1 for me. Hit open, and bang, it's done it. All the data's been imported. You can see we've made folders according to the homeroom field, and in the 1-2 Burke folder are all the kids that belong to that homeroom, and so forth. So we've imported the first text file. Everything's a success there, and this could be as far as you need to take it, depending on your workflow. You could be now ready to print camera cards for use with Capture Post, or for your photographer. They could have QR codes. You can do whatever you need to do from here on. We've imported our first text file. Good-o. So that's pretty straightforward, and most of it is if you're an experienced user. But for a first timer, I hope that has been useful. So let's take it a bit further. At the next step, I'm going to open another job. This particular job, no data. You see there's nothing in details mode, but I've imported the images. Go to images mode. You can see there are images in there. I'm going to use my text file again to import the data to create the subjects and the folders, but at the same time it will match that data to the correct images, so that you don't have to do any manual matching in match mode. So let's go back to details mode and have a look at my next text file. Very similar. Throw your eyes over that one. So this text file is very similar to the previous one. Notice we have the addition of another field, column E. So the 5th field has the kid's file name. Only one image in this job. There was only one image per kid ultimately when we got this text file. So we have a 5th set of data there, the image in column 5, and we'll use that to our advantage to match the data, the incoming data, to the images as we import it. So keep that in mind, so to save us flicking between windows. So column E, number 5, is the image field. Now, we come back into details mode again, subjects, import text file. I have a different text file, as we know, and I go to setup. It remembers the mapping from the previous import. So it sort of pre-filled a few things for us. The text file parameters have stayed the same. We're ignoring the first line. We're separated by comma. Field 4, D was the homeroom. Okay, so that's good. 1, 2, and 3 for first name, last name on ID. That's my protocol. I always have my text files that way. Now, field 5 was not the teacher anymore, because the field 5 was now the image. So we need to be careful when we're importing new text files that we take that into account. So let's blank out teacher and grade, because what were they? The teacher was actually field 6 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, teacher was field 6 and grade was field 7. So teacher was field 6, grade was field 7. The ID remains the same. That's our field, our unique field. And we want to match with images now. So we check that option. Now, broadly speaking, we have two options. The first one, you're probably not going to use a lot. If your data is in the same order as your images, so the first record in your data file belongs to the first image, the second record is the second image, the third record is the third image, and so on. Your text file doesn't even need a file name, doesn't need the image file name in there. It will know what image belongs to what bit of data simply from the order that they are in. So you would check that option. Not very common. More common is that one, and tag. We're going to match according to some image ID field. The image ID field normally being the image file name. And don't get confused by tag. Tag just means file name with or without the JPEG extension. So in our text file we had the full 100.jpg, but we could have just had 100 in there, and it would have worked. Forget about sequence code. We don't really use that anymore. Number would be the image number that you see images mode in the bottom left-hand corner, again, not really used. The one you'll use in this example is tag. Now notice when I selected that option, I'll just toggle, another field in the map popped up. With that option checked, I now need to map which is our image ID field. And as we saw, it was the column 5, E. So we just pop the 5 in there. We have all our mapping correct. We would check it again and recheck it before we hit import. So hit OK, hit open. Data's coming in as before, but this time notice we have matched to the images as well. You can see in details mode itself, the image column has the file name in there. If we go to match mode, if we go to images mode, you can see data's underneath the images, and if we go to match mode, everything's nicely matched. So we've used our text file in this example to not just bring in the data, but also match it to the images we had. Okay, let's take this a step further. Let's take this a step further in the next job. My next job is empty all over again. It's empty all over again. We don't have data or images, but we have effectively the same text file. Same text file. We are going to import it again, but this time by checking one slightly different parameter, it will do an extra thing. It will import the data, yes, but it will actually import the images at the same time and then match the data to the images all in the one step. Really, really nice. So let's do that. How do we do that? Subjects, import text file. It's text file 3. Go to the setup. Okay, the mapping is going to be the same because it's essentially the same text file, yes? So it is a comma delimited. Go through all your options, especially early on when you're getting used to this. Just always check this several times before you import. 1, 2, and 3, first name, last name, ID. Our image was 5. That's the important one when we're working with images. It's 2, 3, 4, 5 for the image. Teacher and grade are 6 and 7 respectively. 5 for the image, teacher and grade 6 and 7. Now, match with images as well. This time we check the option underneath, file name, import images. We've put import images in brackets there to tell you what we'll do with that option. With that option, it will use the image ID field, field 5 in our example, to actually import the images at the same time. Saves you having to do them as a separate step. So select that, hit open. After having checked it the second and third time, I'm cutting corners a little bit, but don't you do that. Okay, process is happening all over again. It will be a bit slower. It will be a bit slower because it's importing the images as we speak. Now, what you should be asking yourself now is how does it know where to find the images? Our text file didn't have a path in there, so how does it know where to go and get those images? Well, there's 2 ways it can know, and only 2 ways. Your text file could have the full path. So rather than just having the file name in there, that could be a full path. It could be X, if X is your image server, X timestone / job name / images, and it could be in there. So you would have the full path name in the image column as the same column. You don't have it as a separate column. And therefore, it doesn't matter where, in that scenario, it doesn't matter where your text file would be. Text file could be on the desktop, images are on the server, it will go off and find them. The second way is, I think, far superior. It's easy. Just leave your text file in the folder with the images, and it will always look there. And you will always know where your text file is. To me, that just seems a natural thing to do. Just pop your text file in the folder with the images, and it will always find the images when you're importing them in this manner. It doesn't look at your fields in TSAdmin or your fields in file properties for file options for T&Js. So that's what you need. You need either the full path and file name in the text file, or you need to have your text file in with the images in the same directory as your images. So you can see what's happened. we started with nothing. We have data, we have images, and they are matched. Really nice, very common thing for people to do. Let's take it again, one step further again. There's more things you can do with respect to images. Again, I'm starting with a blank job. My next, so no data, no images, my next text file, I'm going to do the same thing. It's actually a completely different job. We've got 3 portraits here, 3 different kids. Maybe they're like a high school senior scenario. You can tell their ID, look at their ID, we've got 3 different IDs. An image, but we also have pose information. So we photographed maybe 15 shots per kid, and we only want to use 6. And we've got a text file out of whatever, some other third-party software, perhaps your database management program. You've set poses some other way, or you've indicated which image is to go to which pose by some other way. We can make use of that. We can now import the data, import the images, have it matched, and have the poses set all in the one step with the text file. Taking it further, we can also indicate which of the images is going to be the primary image, the main image. We do that by just putting a P against the appropriate image, or against the appropriate pose. So we're going to use that pose, that image, as the primary for that girl, for example. So let's import this one into this job. We have no images. We could have imported the images first, but let's do it all in one step because I think that's always looks rather good. So we go subjects, import text file, go to that particular text file, hit setup. Now here's where you need to be careful because this text file is quite different to the one before. The mapping is not going to be the same. Yes, it's still a comma delimited text file, so the top left-hand corner stays the same. But if we have another look at it, first name, last name is an ID of my first 3 fields. I always try to keep it that way, just for consistency. Image is field 4 this time. Pose is field 5, and the primary image is field 6. When we don't have a teacher, we don't have a homeroom, we don't have a grade. So with our mapping, I'm not even going to bother with folders. Folders don't seem to make sense here. We could make a folder out of the last name, for example, but really we don't have a use for folders in this particular job. So just leave that blank. We said the image was 4. Last name, last name, and ID have stayed the same. We don't have a homeroom. We don't have a teacher. We don't have a grade. Doesn't that sound heaven to any school kid? We still have a unique field, the ID. So we still set that. We are still going to do the match with images and import them. And then we have a whole bunch of options down the bottom. We are going to set the pose. And all that does is give you another field to map. So as I toggle that, we get another field on the left-hand side to map. And that was field number 5. And we also are going to set the primary image. Which field in our text file has that information? It is field number 6. Again, that toggled on and off when I check the box. Check your mapping one more time because things have changed. 1, 2, 3. Image is 4, pose is 5, primary is 6. Okay, so we're ready to go. Now, have a look at the bottom right-hand corner. There are lots of options you could set in this way. I'm only doing poses and primary, but you can set a background behind your keyed images. You can even set cropping information and color corrections by a text file. You can set a mask. You can set the actual chroma key profile itself. Not that anyone does that anymore, I don't think. You can flag that subject for retouching or from your text file. All these different options. The principle is the same. Check the right box, map the field. Some of those more advanced options, there are knowledge base documents if you want to import cropping information. For example, there is a knowledge base document to show you what format that data needs to be in. But the principle is the same. You just get an extra field to map which each of those options that you check. So hit OK, hit open, and same scenario. The images are coming in. We've got a few more this time, and they are bigger images, being the portrait images. Data's coming in. It'll get matched, and with a little luck, it will have set the poses, and mark the primary image as well. And again, it knows where to find the images because my text file was in the folder with the images. I can see a couple of questions coming through, that's good. And John, I will get to your question. I had planned to cover that. So you see we've made our three subjects. It's showing the primary image in there. If we go to images mode, you can see the images are in there with the appropriate, the correct names underneath, etc. And if we go to poses mode, you can see for each subject, the poses have been set. And the dark grey or the black triangle in the bottom right hand corner indicates the image that is the primary image. So we did all that with the one text file. Okay, so that's that part where we've worked with images. There's a lot you can do with images and text files. Let's move on to orders, and then we will look at when we have to import text files many times, those options in the middle there about replacing and updating. So I'm going to move to my next job where I have my data and images. This is one of the jobs we created earlier with our text file. Everything's matched. It's ready to accept orders. Okay, so if I go to TS Admin, this job has an offer, very simple offer called text files. We have 3 packages on offer, A, B, and C. They are the package codes, A, B, and C. We're ordering a set of package prints, an 8x10, and some wallets. So that's our offer. If we are importing orders, of course you'll need to make sure the offer is set in the job. File properties. That's a common mistake to forget to put an offer in there, and then when you do import the order information, it looks like nothing has happened, that the queue hasn't been built. That's the most common reason, is that the offer hasn't been set here. That's not the end of the world. You just set the offer here again, go into orders mode, reprocess the orders, and everything works fine. Okay, so this job is ready to accept orders from a text file. Let's have a look at one of my text files. Okay, you've seen this text file a few times already. I've got some columns. Here are the 4 things we can import most commonly regarding order information. The package, so fields, columns G, H, I, and J. Package. In there we will put the package codes A, B, and C. If we are offering items, and we are in this example, we have 2 items on offer, and they're just simply X and Y. One of them is adding a vignetted border around the images with the kid's name. The other one is some other frame, I don't remember. But we have 2 items on offer as well called X and Y. Quantity, self-explanatory, how many copies of each, and whether we want to order it against a particular pose or not. This is our first job where the kids just had 1 image per subject. So there's only 1 image per subject. Poses are irrelevant, so that column is going to end up blank. So how do we format all this? Well, it's pretty straightforward. If we want to order package A for that kid, we simply put an A in there. Okay? If I import that now and map it correctly, that kid will get 1 copy of package A. I don't need to put a 1 in there, but there's no harm to do it. If the quantity field is empty, it defaults to 1. Some people put the 1 in there just for completeness, and that's not a bad habit to get into. Now, what if he wants package B as well? Well, we can use the same line of data. We can go A space B. So A space B, that kid, Mateo Acosta, is now going to get package A and package B because it's A space B. And we just follow that same principle. Delimiting, separating within the field, separating each package by a space character. So he's now going to get package A, B, and C, and 1 copy of each. Now, what if there are items involved? Let's go to Riley. She may want package A with item X. Okay, they just line up. The first value in the package column lines up with the first package in the item column. Next one, Adeline could have package A and C, and she wants package A with item Y, space X. So what happens there? Package A gets item Y, package C gets item X. You see how they line up? The first package with the first item, the second package with the second item. If we wanted to be fancy with the copies, we could go 1 space 1, or perhaps 2 space 1. She's now going to get 2 copies of package A and item Y, and 1 copy of package C with item X. Can you see the pattern there? I'm hoping that makes sense. So that is very common way of, well, that is the way to do it. If we want multiple copies, another way of handling multiple copies, let's have a look at Brooke Cunningham, for example. Let's say she wants 3 copies of package A. We can do A and put 3 in there, that's fine. If your other bit of software, wherever you're getting this text file from, if that's the way it needs to work, that's good. Or you could do, and we'll use Annabelle Fisher as an example, you can go A space A space A, and that will also give you 3 package A's. Now, what's the difference between the two? Practically there's no difference. You're still going to print 3 package A's. In the first example, in your queue, that's where you'll see the difference. In your queue, in the first example, you'll see A there once, and then when you select it, you'll see that 3 copies have been ordered against it. For Annabelle Fisher, where we've gone A space A space A, you will get 3 pages in the queue. You will actually see 3 distinct pages of 1 copy each. So practically, it's how they appear in the queue that is different. In terms of printing, possibly the first example will be a bit quicker because we are only printing once and then getting 3 copies, as opposed to the other one where you're actually rendering 3 different pages. But nowadays in version 4.7, with its enhanced use of signatures and caching, that's probably going to be identical anyway. The other way of ordering multiple packages or several packages for the one subject is to have a separate line for each kid. So if we move down, let's go to Hannah Fox. I'm going to insert a row below. In fact, I'll insert 2 rows below, and I'll copy that information and paste into there. And see here, right here is an example of how much easier it is to work in a spreadsheet program with a CSV than with a text file in Notepad, for example. So for Anna, if she wanted A, B, and C, for example, instead of going A space B space C, I just have a separate line for each package. A, B, C. Okay. Always check, make sure the ID is the same, because that's how it knows that those 3 lines are actually the same person, because the ID is the same for each. The student ID is the same for each. And we can put items in there if need be, and copies. Okay, oops. So I hope that makes sense. Again, this is actually quite well documented as well if you need more information about formatting for importing text files with a view of creating your orders and building your queue. So let's go ahead and import this, save it, and it was text file 5. I go to my job. My job's already got information. So subjects, import text file. It's number 5. Let's go to the setup. Now, I've forgotten what that map was, so again, I would have that text file open next to me. It's a little bit more awkward here. But first name, last name, and student ID is field 1, 2, and 3. Homeroom's 4, teachers 5, grade is 6. So the package information is from 7 onwards. Would you agree? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 8, 9, and pose is 10. So the thing is, do I even need to worry about the last name and the first name and the teacher in the homeroom? Yes and no. Yes, only if you think that data may have changed or this text file has got new subjects that weren't there to begin with. But if it hasn't changed, your text file doesn't even need the last name, the first name. All the text file needs For importing order information, all the text file needs is the ID, because that's how it finds the kid, and then the package information, those fields. We don't need the others. We don't even need the others. We could have deleted them out of this text file. So knowing that we could have deleted them, there's no reason we need to import them. So I'm not matching with images, so let's uncheck that, and that gets rid of a whole lot of options. I'm not even going to import or even bother about first name and last name anymore. I'm just importing orders. So the ID, we still need the ID because that's how it will set the right order to the right kid. And then down the bottom, import order information. The option at the top, seldom used anymore. That's a more advanced format. All the order information would be in one line, in one entry. Again, that's documented. It's the old way we used to do it. The queue format is what I've just been describing, the import orders in the queue format. And you can see when I toggle that, it gives me the 4 fields to map. So let's remind ourselves what they were. 7, 8, and 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Package is 7, item is 8, quantity is 9. So package is 7. We're calling it layout because in the old terminology of T&Js, that's what they were. Item was 8. Pose, we're not using, and copies was 9. Would you agree? Okay. Let's check it one more time because again, this is important. Get it right the first time. We don't have to fix it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Quantity is 9. Yes. Okay. Now the options in the middle would have been relevant here had we been importing or mapping the last name and first name fields again, but we're not. So all we're doing is importing order information. Hit OK. Hit open. It knows now we're importing order information. You are prompted with that window. Where do you want to put the orders? In the default order set, into a new order set, or another order set that exists already. Not the topic for this webinar, order sets. So we won't bother with order sets. We'll just put them in the default. Hit OK. It's brought in that order information. You can see it there. It's populated that column in details mode. If we go to the queue, voila, magically you have the queue as per your text file. And you can see Annabelle Fisher, where we ordered AAA 3 times, her package is in there 3 times. And whereas Brooke Cunningham, we went A and then asked for 3 copies, her page is only in there 3 times. 1 time, I should say, but you can see down the bottom there it indicates that she wants 3 copies. So we see the difference in the 2 different ways of doing the text files there. And you can see the kids who ordered items have got it. Adele Brady has got item Y, I think that was, and Hannah Fox has got item X. So we've used a text file to import order information. For completeness, you need to know that you can also import order information from a text file in point and click mode. Again, not as common anymore with the database. You could import a text file through here, and you can see here we only work with the package information, but doing it in details mode is better because it goes through the order system, it goes through into your orders column, etc., as opposed to just building a queue. Doing it in details mode, you build the queue and you've got the order information in details mode. So I hope the importing orders make sense. I want to now have a look at those options in the middle, the subjects, import text file, these options, because we've already had some questions about that. I'm going to go back. Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to import text files with each of those options because all we'd be doing is going through the mechanics of importing all over again. But I will describe the differences with examples, if that makes sense. So they're the 4 examples you've got in the middle. So what we're talking about here is if you need to import the text file a 2nd, a 3rd, or a 4th time, etc., or in the same text file if it comes across the subject more than once. It needs to know what to do if the incoming data is against a subject it already has. You've got 4 options. Leave existing details, replace existing details, only replace if blank, or update existing details. So let's look at them one at a time with examples. So the first example, first option you've got is to leave the existing details. The incoming data will be ignored. So why bother? Well, because your incoming data may have new subjects. These options only apply, those options in the middle of that setup window only apply if it finds a subject. So the incoming data, when it comes in, finds that subject already. So if there's any new subjects, none of these options apply for the brand new ones. So that's leave existing details. The incoming data will be ignored, but any new subjects will still be imported as normal. And I have an example. Okay, very simple first names, John and Sam, 3-letter names. So the existing data is on the left. We've got sort of 3 records, John, a blank, and then John. The incoming data is Sam and Sam, and then a blank. And you can see the result is unchanged. For those new, subjects, the data does not get replaced. If there were any new subjects, they would get imported. That one's pretty straightforward. The middle one, replace all existing details. Here it starts to get a bit more tricky. The incoming data will replace existing data even if the incoming data is blank. So it literally is wipe what you've got and replace it with what's coming in, even if what's coming in for a given field is blank. And of course, any new subjects come in as normal, nothing changes there. So examples, John, blank, John. Incoming data is Sam, Sam, blank. And you can see our result. We get Sam, Sam, blank. So the important one to recognize there is that the incoming data first name for record 3 was blank. It overwrote the data that was in the field John, and we end up with a blank. So that's replacing. It literally replaces anything that you've got. Third option, only replace the existing data if the fields are blank. So the incoming data will replace existing fields only if the existing data is blank. Back to our example. So we've got John, blank, John, existing. Coming in is Sam, Sam, blank. And have a look at the result. For record number 1, John stays the same, okay, because it wasn't blank. So Sam did not overwrite John. In example number 2, Sam did fill that field because the existing record, the field was blank. Field number 3, or example number 3, the incoming data was blank, so the existing data stayed. That's how it's different to the option before. So we end up with John, Sam, John. Where data was there, it did not get overwritten. Data got only written into if the existing field was blank. Now, final option is to update existing fields. So we flipped it around a little bit here. Existing data will be replaced by incoming data only if the incoming data is not blank. Okay, so we've got John, blank, John. We have Sam, Sam, blank. And you can see we end up with Sam, Sam, John. Okay, so the important records there are well, all of them really. So Sam replaces John in the first record. Sam replaces the blank in the second record, but the blank from the incoming data does not replace John in the third record. That's how that one is different. Now, I don't expect you to memorize those 3 options, but keep in mind they are there, and so you need to know how to use them when you are importing subsequent text files. And of course, you can refer to this video any time you like. And it's also documented somewhere in one of the bigger manuals as well. So I hope that's answered the question. Whoever asked it, I think it was John. Yeah, thanks, John. Now, I do need to point out, this does not apply to orders. This is only applicable to the subject fields. If I import that text file again, the order text file, and I think we may even do that. So for way of example, let's leave all those orders there. If I now import, this text file again and do A for Jordan Lane, who's a big spender. If I import this file again, no matter what option I check in the middle, that doesn't apply to the order information. The other orders for Matteo, etc., they'll get added. Maybe you can put them in a different set. So the orders will also always import. They'll always import again. So if we were working with this, if you are receiving multiple text files with order information, keep in mind all the orders get imported all the time. If you didn't want them, you'd have to get rid of them out of this text file. Hope that made sense too. We're going to finish off with, let me get back to Neopack, exporting the data. Now, I'm not talking about doing custom, doing those sort of exports out of here, the admin exports, etc., where the data is pretty much fixed, the options preset by the configuration of the type of export you're using. I'm talking about a manual export of data. We go to Subjects, Export Text File, call it what you want, and I will call it, I've already got one called Webinar when I was testing this. We'll end up overriding it. So let me go Webinar 2. So that's what my text file is going to be called. It is a plain text file, it's not a CSV. Still, we're going to set up, and in here we decide which fields we want to export. First name, last name, ID, and then you can choose a whole lot of other fields. Obviously, you can choose all the fields that you've imported, all the fields, the subject fields that are in your job. But you can also choose things like the name. Now, what's the name? The name is a concatenation of the first and last name. If you need the names in one field rather than in two, that's your option there. The subject key, that can be very handy to export the key. What else we got? We've got things like the folder, whether or not you've made a folder, you have a field that has the folder information. Whatever the folder is called, you may have manually made folders, you can import the folder name for that subject there. The key we've discussed, the label, whole lot of information about the images, the image number, the tag, the file name, the full path of the file name, your corrections, cropping informations, the pose, whether you're using a mask and what that mask is, background and so forth. And then a whole lot of parameters relating to your orders, retouch flags, etc. You can decide whether to export it as a comma or a tab delimited text file, which you're all experts on now. And where you do have multiple images, are we going to export a line for each image, and the primary image will be the last line in the text file? Or do you only want to export one line per subject? So it'll be one line per image if you're using image information, if you're exporting image information as well. So that's how you do a custom export. A lot of people still use it. Certainly when you go file export and you choose a PSPA, etc., you get a text file out of that. You don't really have control over those fields. This is where you would do a custom export. And of course, for the more savvy people, you can also get data directly out of your database. And as we saw last week or 2 weeks ago for our first webinar, there's a whole lot of reports out of TS Portal as well where you can get data. But this is how you would export a text file directly out of Neopack. And we're coming up right onto the hour. So thanks for hanging in there. Let me see what questions we had. We covered one of them. Is there anything else? Sandra is typing a question. Sometimes when importing new date of birth data, it will not appear. So I usually have to create a new system field. Can you explain why this might happen? So not off the top of my head, Sandra. So I usually have to create a new system field. I can only think, Sandra, maybe your field in the job, edit fields. If your data for the date of birth is in sort of a date format, make sure you select date there. And you could also tell it it's the birth date in this field. That's the only thing I can think of without trying it myself. Chanel has a question coming. While those questions are coming on the subjects of fields, most of them here are text. and they are normally going to be text. You would seldom have a need for an integer. I mean, unless you're doing calculations on the fields, things like a phone number, that is not a number. That is a text field. If a grade isn't really a number, you're not going to be calculating on those grades. You're not going to say grade 3 minus grade 1 equals grade 2. No, they are text fields. Most times your fields will be text. The other very common one, of course, is graphics, if you want to import the graphic directly into the field. But usually they're text. Very seldom are they actually integer. Very seldom are they really a number. Does it make any difference importing into data post rather than Neopack? No, absolutely not. I've used Neopack, but details mode is identical in Neopack, Pack Builder, and data post. Now, it wasn't the subject of this meeting, but of course we can do, Chanel, lots of things with a text file and group images in Neo Group, and that may end up being one day a webinar on itself. With a text file in Neo Group, you can set group row names and the row and position of kids, import the group image, do all that sort of stuff. Similar standard, if I have imported a text file and they're split up into folders, if I try to import another file, it will ignore the new folders and I have to create them manually. Yes. Well, if it's the same subject and it finds the subject and they're in the existing folder, it goes against that subject. It's not going to make a new folder for an existing subject. So it's not going to make miscellaneous folders. That's my understanding of the question and the answer. Perhaps Mark can chip in there as well. Yeah, so as Mark said, the program will not change a folder that a subject is in. If that's something that is important to people, that's certainly something we can look at for a future version to do it with a text file. All right, I think we're done. We'll call it a day. I will stop the recording, hang around if there are any more questions. Carrie and Mark, maybe they'll hang around too. But otherwise, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas as well, and Happy New Year and all that sort of stuff. Be safe. Have a very Merry Christmas, everybody, and we will catch you soon. Bye for now.